Don't worry about it. Say what comes to mind.
Hmm.
Alrighty, I'm here with Dermot O'Connor, the angry animator and not so angry podcaster. I was listening
Nah.
to the most recent episode of your podcast, and you're a very gentle podcast voice.
Thanks. Yeah. Try. Yeah,
Let
that's the our Blooms and Barnacles one, right? The
Yep.
James. Yeah, yeah. The James Joyce pod Ulysses. Yeah.
Although
That's
you,
been
you
used.
seem to have you seem to be into Homer at this point. I mean, are you still talking about it in the context of James Joyce's Ulysses?
Yeah, James Joyce's Ulysses. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I've learned a lot about early 20th century Irish politics and culture. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It's
Well,
a
hey,
very
let's
interesting
talk
little
about
scene actually, because we've made a lot of friends in Dublin who are involved.
ah, let's talk about podcasting for a bit. Because I
Yep.
was one of the early podcasters, and when I started, it was a lot easier to get guests than it is now because there weren't 2 million podcasts. Now anybody
Yeah,
who
yeah.
has anything to say is just inundated with podcast requests. So it's hard for me even to get people that I've had on the show for years.
Right,
It's
right.
bizarre, and I think
Yeah,
largely it's because the whole internet has sort of been wrapped up and commoditized by the big tech companies and the big entertainment companies, such that the whole peer-to-peer ethos of the early internet is just gone.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like the
So
blogs, like they're all taken away by Facebook and Twitter. And I do miss that not Web 1.0, but the period of the 10 years after 2000. I think it was a lot less flaky, less AOL ding ding dings. But you could start a blog and build an audience. Did it myself, and you could people would find you. The search engine optimization wasn't as rigged, and like it's just insane now trying to game these systems, and people have gotten so good or at them or evil at them. For me, like whenever I'll put content up and I'm getting 100 views, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why? And then I'll go online and see people doing stuff that's like levels beneath that, and they have like 1 million views. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? And it can be disheartening, all right. And then they tell you just keep posting regularly. It's like, yeah, I'll keep posting regularly, and your fucking algo will still give me like 150 views or 140 the week after that. So yeah, let me keep doing that. YouTube. And the content farms. There's one thing that sums up. Like I love YouTube and I despise it at the same time. It's beyond love hate. Um, the, the, the the best part of it's just so good, but the worst of it is like killing people. Like wood fractal burning is a thing where people have these videos showing how to like take your microwave oven apart and rig it to a piece of wood with the current going through it, and it creates these fractal patterns. And a couple of hundred people have died doing this, including electricians. And it's really dangerous. So there's a woman called Anne Reardon who has a YouTube channel called How to Cook, and she's brilliant. Like she has a food science degree, and I think her husband seems to be like an engineering type. And she did a debunking video of it, and YouTube pulled her video because they said it wasn't showing dangerous things. But the videos that she was debunking that were actually showing the dangerous things were left online. And like our decision is final, you know. There's a guy in Portland, Adrian's Digital Basement, lovely guy, and he does all these like tech. I've been watching a lot of these like guys fixing old computers. I went down that rabbit hole for a bit. And I know now not to switch on my old Amiga computer. It might burst. um, like those capacitors are not to be trusted. Fine. But anyway, he had a second and a third YouTube channel, like people do for spillovers and, like stuff that's not, I don't want to edit that so much. I'll just put it on this. So his third channel got taken down for impersonation. And he said, I'm a partner. You send me 1099s. It's me. It's my channel. We have reviewed. I am a human. I have reviewed your channel. You are impersonating Adrian. Our decision is final. So all right, human. So he posts on Twitter. And he said, I have like 25 followers on Twitter, but I went viral. People were outraged for me. They shared and shared and shared. YouTube sees it. And then the actual human comes in and says, oh, we're so sorry. We work very hard to ensure safety. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't have these video content farms showing people how to microwave a poached egg that explodes in people's faces. People have had like facial scarring from these microwave poached eggs exploding in their faces. And they leave these things up, and they're not liable to a class action suit under American law. But the European Union has a slightly different law than America. So there's a new law going through the EU, which will hold the content providers legally liable for people who die through negligence. Now, somebody puts up one video. Okay, fine. That's not much you can do about that. But you've had now months of people dying following these stupid videos. And it's just insanity. Like I'll watch the computer repair guys, and whenever they take a monitor up, they'll always say, "You see this part here? Do not touch it. You could die." And they'll show you got to like bleed the, with this little baster thing, you got to bleed the energy out of the cathode ray tube, or there could be 20,000 volts in there waiting for you to touch it. And I've never seen one of those guys do that without warning the viewer. But these these content farm creeps, they're just grinding out this stuff, getting 1 million, 2, 3 million views. And like they're making about $1 per 1,000 views. So you see a YouTube video with 1 million views, they made $1,000 for that, which, it's not bad, but it's not great either. So they have to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million views, maybe if higher CPM, so they get $2 per click. And they're grinding them out, and they don't give a crap. And YouTube takes 40%, so they're fine with it. Yeah, no, it's
when I do my taxes, I review my bank statements for the previous year, and I'll look. Oh, look! Here's a payment from Google for $100. That I got 6 months ago. I didn't even notice it. It has no effect on my life. I certainly can't count on it, to help support me. But there is this tiny little trickle of, fractions of pennies that accumulate in my AdSense account. And once in a blue moon, actually, it's more often than that, because a blue moon is like the second full moon in a month. And I think it happens about every 3.2 years. So it's more often than that. It's maybe once or twice a year I'll get $100 from Google for my YouTube content, but it's nothing.
Yeah,
it's
and
nothing.
I've seen channels that I'm fairly sure are shadow banned, and it's and it's astonishing that they can just cavalierly do this to people, and then expect, and then favor the charlatans who are, crashing planes for clout. That's another podcast I heard this morning. Some YouTuber
crashing planes for clout. What do you mean?
Yeah. There's a YouTuber who did he was a former Winter Olympian. He was at Sochi, and he flew a plane, and he basically simulated a crash. And he was actually in a plane. It was made in 1940, so it was it wasn't some like cheap knockoff that he was flying. And he bailed out, and has the whole thing on film. And the plane goes into the ground, and of course the FAA finds out, and they go, "Well, if this was deliberate, crashing a plane is against the law. Like, you're not allowed to deliberately crash a plane. It's kind of dangerous. People hike in that area, so you could kill people. You could start a forest fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as dangerous as a gender reveal party. Just don't do it." So no, I think he's facing 20 years, and he pled guilty, and did a plea bargain. So he'll probably be out in 3 months on good behavior, and he'll be doing something stupid and life-threatening again, because these people seem to fail upwards. There were 2 other YouTubers who did they staged fake bank robberies, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, with like full like gear and everything, like. There's no comprehension with these people, and YouTube just like lets them stay on the platform. And it's like Chinese proverb, kill one, warn 100. Like, take one of these high profile clowns and take their channel away, ban them from the platform for life. You will still be richer than God. Like, you don't need this stuff. And content farms is grinding out the same fucking thumbnails and the same content, and people gobbling this garbage up. And the more of that kind of filth builds up, there's only so much attention that's out there. It's a finite commodity, and they're just giving people's time away to these like shysters. It's sick.
But woe be unto the person who in 2020 suggests that maybe, the coronavirus came out of the Wuhan virology lab. Just that suggestion will get you banned.
the party line in 2020 was that's a conspiracy theory, and then they
Mm-hmm.
changed it so that it was, and then it wasn't, and I don't know if it is or it isn't anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
So can you see
it's
the
just
chat?
bizarre. I can't actually, no.
Okay. Well, we've got a comment from Curtis Maximus
Oh,
51,
private. Okay. Yeah.
and he writes, "This is what I can't quite understand about all these danger of AI guys. We've been under the influence of AI for quite some time, and it's just accepted. Commoners can use AI, and we must regulate." So I'm not sure what to say to that. Do you have? Does that spark anything for you?
Can you broke apart there a little bit? Can you repeat the question again?
There should be a link that you can click on that will allow you to see the chat.
Hmm. I see private chat and comments. Is it comments?
Check comments then.
Oh, I see it. I see it now. I see it now. Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, like that's the thing. Like a lot of this crap's been out there for a good bit. And like there's books that are 10 years old talking about the dangers of algorithms and social media. And Kamo and I were talking about this before the stream. Um, my thing would be to have like a universalist system based on very, very economic left-wing principles that will guarantee everybody, like a basic income, basic healthcare, basic everything. And I don't fall for politicians who come up with the weasel words that there's not enough money. One thing I've learned in life, there's always money. There's just not money for you or me or, whoever they have in the out group. So the alternative to that is a series of false economies. And where, for example, bin collections should be free at the point of use, end of discussion. If you don't do that, and if you make it something that you pay for, then people will start fly tipping. We were walking in what should be a pristine bog, up the
I think
up the
American listeners
sorry,
might need a translation there.
yeah, bogs, marshes in Ireland
No,
are one of the most
even
unique
before
habitats.
that, bins. I guess most people know that a bin is
Oh,
a trash receptacle. Bin
yes.
tipping,
Oh,
um,
fly tipping, yeah, like when
or
you just
fly
dump it in the
tipping.
countryside. Yeah,
Hmm.
you just go to the countryside and you tip it into a bog and or this a ditch or what have you. And so again, with AI and any of these new technologies, they're going to put a ton of people out of work. And if we look at it not like going back to Orwell, like changing things in a hole and corner kind of way, or change the entire system, we need to change the entire system and not just the AI or this part of capitalism or that part of capitalism. The entire economic system has to be changed so that you have an absolutely equitable distribution, and you don't flatten everything out to one. It's not like everybody makes like 500 euro or dollars a week. It's not that, but you can have a system where there's a band of income, but we don't need billionaires. We don't even need millionaires, and we don't need people living in cardboard bloody boxes either. And that's the system that we have right now. And the only thing keeping you from the cardboard box or me is like, say, AI or some new tech puts me or you out of work. So it's probably more complex than I would have given thought to. But I personally wouldn't get caught up in AI as an isolate. Like it's way more than that. I see lots of case uses for AI that I would love. And again, we're talking to KMO earlier about this. I work in traditional animation, and instead of having AI create freakish beer commercials, give me an AI where I can do this drawing and that drawing and maybe one in the middle and have AI animate all the in-between frames. And that kind of AI will be a tool that is being used by a human to create something new rather than aping something new by mining something created by other humans. It would be a tool that I could use to, like a lot of people could use to bring back, say, hand-drawn animation or types of animation that haven't been considered yet, because it's not the keyframe drawings that grind you down. It's the 100 in-between drawings between them that are incredibly life-sucking. They're one reason why we don't see hand-drawn features anymore very much. And there's plenty more case uses for AI that I would use for like for example, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos of people playing Age of Empires 2, the definitive edition. I don't know what got me back into this. But there's all the little isometric town buildings and things, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was an AI that would be able to take the template and just like intelligently under the control of the artist, like, can we do like 40 variants of that? Imagine how tedious it would be to make 40 variants. I can give it the template and it can do, okay, we'll rearrange this. That'll look like completely real. And it would be, and getting back to like technology, it goes back to people like Neil Postman and Marshall McLuhan and Lewis Mumford. But Neil Postman's thing was, you should be the person using the technology. It shouldn't be the person using you. And I had this epiphany way before the AI when I realized that my animation was, I was using a lot of Flash to create my animation. And the more I went on, the harder I tried to make it not look flashy, it just kept looking flashy because the program imposed its aesthetics on me. And one animator at the time said, I'm not a Flash animator, I'm an animator who's using Flash. But the horror was, Flash was using him to animate. And it's, for me, the path was to go back to hand-drawn work and using Photoshop. Again, another program, but a program that I had more direct control of and power over the aesthetics, and the quality of my work went up by orders of magnitude. I was beginning to return back to my kind of hand-drawn style from the 1990s, which I missed. So again, probably not a coherent answer for you, but there's a comment. Everyone thought AI would first take all the fast food and hard labor jobs. Apparently, it will take all the creative jobs first: music, painting, writing, production, creative assistant. Yeah, I'm not sure it will. I think it'll take some of them. Like, I think if you were to give an AI like a script to write, I don't think it's going to create anything. We were talking about shows that we love that were like off new, like fresh, like Devs and Severance, stuff like that. If the goal is to watch like some very derivative and slightly strange story, I think AI would be good for that. But I think best
It
use
could
the
write Marvel superhero movies pretty well, probably.
probably at this point, yeah. If you fed it all the Marvels, they're so formulaic because they all are built around that god awful James Campbell Vogler like hero's journey bullshit. But we could go down a rabbit hole there. But yeah, like, but it will take, like, I remember years ago somebody said, if your job can be done by a series of yes no questions, you're fucked, because they'll find a way to take that off you and give it to a robot. Like, they they're giving it, they would rather have like this vastly complex series of technology to do like a cashier's job than to pay one cashier. It's staggering. But I know people on the libertarian side, I would be on the very hard socialist side. I know people on the libertarian side are smart enough to see, Christ, if we don't start paying people a UBI or some other system, this doesn't end well. If you are going to take away everyone's job, then you get into the Marxist analysis of like, well, who the fuck is going to pay for anything? Like, if nobody is working, who buys the products being made? Like, will the robots buy them? Like, what's going to happen here? And it's the AI thing came on faster than I thought it would. I never thought I would see something that I hate it, but it's still incredibly impressive, like what it does. And like they're cracking the whole fingers thing too. I saw that. I noticed that, like, oh, there's 5 fingers now, not 17. But it would be very useful for me in certain instances, but not to create unique work. But if I wanted to flesh out like a background environment where, oh Christ, so many details, and it's like, am I going to get sucked into this void of like all this noodly stuff where I can type in the word? I can see myself using it for that. But the foreground stuff, acting, characters, facial stuff, like, I'd rather just draw that. Like, there'll be something of me in that. There won't be anything of me in anything I can type into a prompt. And it's just taking what
Unless
some
the
of the people.
first thing you type into the prompt is, in the style of 1990s Dermot O'Connor, give me
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like, that would be one thing too, if I could feed it my own style and go, right, I
Mhm.
need this, that just like to, but again, not foreground it.
That's
Like,
that's a couple years away at max, though.
mm, mm,
I mean, right now the big weakness of machine learning models is that they require enormous amounts of data to learn anything.
mm-hmm,
And this is kind of Noam Chomsky's main criticism of people who are all excited about what we now call AI, is that it's not intelligent in the way that humans are intelligent. Humans, a
mm,
human learns its native tongue, his or her native tongue, by listening to mom and dad, and two examples, two speakers, or even just one is enough, for you to acquire the language because you're built to do
Mm.
it. But to
Yeah.
teach English to AI, you have to feed it millions and millions of words from all kinds of different sources. And,
Mm.
they're just not efficient at learning right now. So one
Yeah.
person, one single artist, it's hard for you to produce enough stuff to train an AI to ape your style, but it's doable. I mean, clearly it's doable because famous artists
Mm.
are being ripped off all the time by AI. But
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
that pretty soon that will be a standard feature that just comes with, like, whatever the 2025 version of Photoshop is.
Mm.
Here's a 25-minute tutorial. Train the AI in your style, like draw one
Yeah.
picture,
Yeah.
and the AI
There
will
was a
figure out what to do to make it, to continue drawing in your style.
there's a movie about, and I cannot remember for the life of me, and I've tried to Google it and I can't find it, but the premise was, and it was like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was a good while back, and it was about a classical musician whose son was a programmer, and they go to a concert and they're playing this piece of music by Bach, and the dad says, "I don't recognize this," and the son's beaming, and he said, I wrote it. My program wrote it. I gave it everything Bach ever wrote, and I asked it to write something new. So this is a new Brandenburg concerto, and the dad, and he's looking at his dad like expecting him to be happy, and the old man is like this, and he sort of, you can see him die inside. And the next scene, there's a funeral. The old man has just gone and killed himself. But the thing is, he needn't have bothered, because my question for that programmer would be, okay, I'm going to let you feed that machine everything by Bach and Buxtehude and Handel and Monteverdi. Can it write a symphony by Beethoven? Without me giving you Beethoven, if I ran that machine for 1,000,000 years, would it ever produce Beethoven's choral symphony? And the answer would be no. I just don't see it, because the human mind like leaps and creates these new things out of the existing forms. So until such time as that happens, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. Um, and yeah, I can see it taking some jobs away, but not the high end stuff. The Hollywood writers on strike right now are more being threatened not by AI. They're being threatened by the studios that are trying to silo them out of the writers' rooms into little discrete groups. It's like the old production line, right? Like when they used to silo industrial workers so that they couldn't. I think Amazon does it too, so that the workers can't get together in one space and foment revolution or a union or what have you.
Well,
That's the real
on the
danger to writers right now. Not,
on the topic of the writer's strike and AI, though, I was reading a summary of the demands that the writers are making and the response they were
Mhm.
getting from the studios,
Yeah.
and it was a long list of demands. And one of those
Mm.
demands was AI will not be used to write scripts, point blank,
Mhm.
period. And with
Yeah.
every other demand that the writers made, the studio came back with a compromise proposal. But on that one, the studio said no.
Mm.
Absolutely not. There's no room whatsoever for negotiation. We will be using AI to write content,
Right.
period. You know,
Yeah. I mean, stuff like copy, like, the I can see, but like the other thing, like I saw one guy doing like he asked AI to produce sequels to existing movies, and what came out was surprisingly Shawshank Redemption. That was it, and write a sequel to the Shawshank Redemption, and what was spat out was actually quite coherent. So I could see executives playing around with programs until they come up with something like rolling dice like that. That was kind of good. Yeah, so, yeah, I can see them not wanting to do that, but could
of
this
all the
thing ever
movies,
write, like, an actual full script?
Shawshank Redemption is, I don't want to say it's the perfect movie, but it's pretty close. And
Mm,
it does not require a sequel in any way. I mean,
yeah,
that is a complete story.
yeah, yeah. No, the thing spat was a YouTuber, and he asked it, and it spat out this thing, and he said, "Now write a sequel to that," and they wrote a third one, and the continuing adventures, and it was very good at it. I was like, "Holy shit, yeah, what's going on?" But if I asked it to write a script, like I've seen other YouTubers, like, ask it to write like a script. Now give me a script with me and this, and gave it the whole scenario. And yeah, no, if what came out was really fucking weird. So on the radio, they were saying how the writers are out together and make a show. or W/E, but when they go to record the show, they need one.
Whatever, I
Oh, that's right.
think.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it's very important that there's a writer on the set to work with because in Hollywood, at least in the Hollywood production, apparently there's a lot of back and forth and changes. So this is, to me, having worked just in the animation end of it, there is this relentless pressure to reduce costs, and it's the faster, better, cheaper triangle. You pick two. So guess what's going to go? So someone's going to get squeezed. So they're not going to squeeze the profits of the studio that's making billions. They're going to squeeze the lives of a few writers. And again, they'll come for everybody down the pipeline. It's not just going to end there. It never does. And I won't mention studio names, but it's fairly constant. I had a friend who was hired to work on animation direct a live action animated movie. I won't name it, but you've heard of it. And this is about 7, 8 years ago. And they were basically trying to squeeze him to do it for the same money as the first movie in the series for the same price with no inflation increase. And again, we're talking about 2010, 2011, 2012 here. This is well before all the crap now. And he's Italian, and he said, "You will forgive me if I do not care about the financial problems of a multi-million-dollar corporation." And he said, "I read Variety. I know how much money these movies make." And he basically got them to capitulate. But he was one person with a very, very strong will. And all of his friends were begging him, just take the job, take the job. And he said, "I am not going to do this for the same money that I did 10 years ago. It's probably the last job I'll ever do. They're going to pay me for it." So he was going to get that last little squeeze out of the traditional hand-drawn stuff.
Do you know who Sam Altman is?
I've heard the name, but I
So
don't.
he's the CEO of OpenAI, which is the company that it started off as an open source nonprofit entity, and now it is it is a for-profit company, and it is 49% owned by Microsoft. And they're the creators of Chat GPT, GPT-3, GPT-4, and Sam Altman was called to Washington, D.C. to testify in front of Congress, I think last week. And one of the things he said, which is absolutely absurd, he said that we shouldn't think of large language models and the chatbots that run on them, like ChatGPT, as entities. We should think of them as tools. And I'm just like, that's absurd. I mean, you've created something which I can talk to in conversational English, and it responds to me in conversational English. And I'm a human being. My brain is built to, project entity, project a presence into cars, into microwave ovens, into all kinds of stuff that has no inner life and doesn't talk. I still see those things as entities. For you to design something that talks to me in conversational English and gives all appearances of understanding what I'm saying and tell me not to think of it as an entity, that's just stupid. That is stupid and unrealistic and just a moronic thing for a smart person to say. I mean, that is smart person stupidity right there.
Yeah.
There is no reasonable expectation that even 1 in 1,000 people can interact with these things and not intuit some intelligence and presence behind it.
Yeah.
That's just not how human brains work, Sam Altman. Come on.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's the question? It's do you agree with Sam Altman that we shouldn't anthropomorphize these LLMs? Are they just a tool or something different? That's kind of like saying, should we not be bound to the earth by gravity? We are bound to the earth by gravity. It should doesn't even enter into it. There is no should. This is how it works. It's like, should parents love their children? We are designed to do that, because if parents didn't, they wouldn't bother to expend enormous resources to see them through their childhood and their adolescent years into, reproductive adulthood. We just wouldn't do it if we didn't feel love for them. So there's no should to it. The should doesn't even enter into it. That's just, it's a mal-application of that concept.
Yeah, well, obviously we can use them as a tool, but we're dealing with a capitalist system that's just spent billions on these things. So they want money, they want profit. And again, they don't care where the profit comes from. They just want money. And it's like we were talking earlier about identity politics and social justice themes being inserted into Hollywood movies. They're chasing dollars. That's all they're doing. They do not care. I've worked in the belly of that beast. They do not care one way or the other. Somebody was writing about, again, one of the comments of one of these YouTube videos, they said that or in one of the videos, they said they used to live in a very progressive city, and I think somewhere like Portland, but there was like a chain store, and they would have, they didn't have plastic bags in the store, and you had to buy like a reusable bag because they were trying to save the planet, doing their bit. And then they moved to like a conservative city, and the same chain was there, but you can get plastic bags in that one. So they were selling different things to different people based on the demographics, and all these corporations are like that. Like the people like throwing razor blades down toilets because they're advocating one trans thing. The same company followed the chain. They're exploiting people at the other end of it, or they have a conservative branch making money from conservative people somewhere else. They only care about money. And your brain, my brain, all our brains, if you're empathetic in any way, where you are on the spectrum doesn't matter, wants evolutionarily or through nature, you don't want to think like that. You want to imagine somebody gives a shit. And it's very hard to look at these corporations and realize they don't give a flying fuck about anything other than money, and then hiding behind the isms like they've been doing with everything now. If you don't like our all-female version of this movie, you're a sexist. Maybe you are, but good chance you're not, but they're going to call you on anyway. It's the most despicable thing. Again, one of these major entertainment companies, and I'm not going to name it, but I bet you can guess what one I'm talking about. One of my friends had worked in one of their theme park divisions for 20 years, and he was still on contract. They still hadn't made him permanent. And he was designing rides that people's lives depended on, and because they didn't want to pay him healthcare. And the other thing they'll do, there was one old guy in that company who'd been there for 50 years. He was 2 weeks from retirement. And it's like once you're like that in one of these companies and you're 2 weeks from retirement, that's when they won't fire you, but they'll just cancel your position. And then no pension for you. Imagine that. They have all the little games sorted out, and they have all the little signs on the wall about how tolerant they are, how much they care about equality, and all this fucking poison. They don't give a fuck. And if you want to protect yourself from this stuff, it has to be done as a collective. It has to be done no matter what that person beside you is. I've had friends, I'm very left-wing. Some of my best friends, I worked for one guy was a conservative Mormon who liked Ayn Rand. We got on fine. But those are the kind of people you all need to get together, because the guy that you're really fighting is the little guys on the top of the big pyramid. They don't give a fuck about you. And they did on our department in too. Again, I'm fighting the temptation to name this company. But yeah, they threw people under the bus and they didn't give a damn. And the law, forget. What are you going to do? Hire a lawyer? Take a multi-billion-dollar corporation, one of the biggest on the planet, to court?
Yeah, as if
because
they could just bury you. I mean,
yeah,
they can delay the proceedings until you're broke, basically.
Yeah, and they'll do a diversity push. So we're good people. But, when it comes to getting rid of those people too, they'll get rid of them too. Don't worry. Don't lose any sleep over that. They'll get stuffed. Everyone gets stuffed in the end. Yeah.
Hey,
I'm glad
let's
to be out from
change the
under that.
topic. Let's change the topic radically. You and I know each other because we were both involved in the peak oil scene, a scene which
Yeah.
is completely disintegrated.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see where the different people in that scene have gone, the
Yeah.
different directions they've taken. I could go on about it, but I won't. So I'm curious to get your unbiased first blush. What's looking back on your time in the peak oil scene? What do you think about?
I think it's coming back. Like, it will come back. That's one thing John Michael Greer said a while ago. It's going to come back with a vengeance. But I think what happened, why it disintegrated the first time, was a lot of the people who were involved in it were PMC types, professional middle managerial class, who had this funny idea that it was so self-evidently obvious that soon there was going to be this entire ecosystem of sinecures and jobs, and I can be hired as a consultant, and ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And when it became obvious that, oh no, it's going to be like maybe 20 more years or 30 more years of slow grind before we start to see the knock-on effects, there's no money in that. Fuck that. I think I'll get a job working for a fossil fuel company. Yeah, I'll name Stuart Earns was one of the guys on the oil drum. And the last I saw him, he was advocating for fracking in Scotland. He lives in England. So yeah, good one. Nice one. So again, you have to be and making fun of people in Scotland who didn't want to drink fucking carcinogenic water that would go on fire. So this a lot of the people, some of the people involved in the oil drum stayed active, like Gail, the actuary, still writes. She's very much still on the, fine infinite growth on the finite system is not going to work. And there's been some people like that who kind of still stuck it out. But again, they were also entering into the new age of the internet where Twitter and Facebook was going to suck everybody into it. And I bet they were seeing their stats go down. Like anybody who ran a blog like myself at that time, you're watching your stats just go down, 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 down. And there's no money in that. There's no, you'd really have to be dedicated and hardcore to say, I'm going to give 20 years of my life to a cause where I'm going to be ridiculed, where all the money is in the unconventional. That was also too when the fracking was really kicking off. And I remember one of the last posts on the oil drum was about unconventional natural gas and all the new crap that was kicking in. Again, floated by 0% interest too. That also killed it. Like a lot of the stuff that flooded the market was financially not profitable, but heavily subsidized. So you knew you were looking at, and they weren't stupid. Like I'm sure they realized this is going to be 20 years because the last time this happened, it was decades. You're looking at very long times before this dries up, and people, and reality begins to impinge on people again. But yeah, and the sad thing is too, looking back, like even if people had begun making the right changes in 2010, it was still too late. Sure as fuck, it's too late now. So we just do the best we can here. Like it's all, and I hate to switch it from like as a hardcore lefty, you're supposed to think about systems, but if the system isn't going to change, at that point you have to say, right, I'm just going to look after me and my family and try to so that we keep the lights on here and get big fucking water drums and make sure there's kerosene in the tank. And what else can I do? Like, it's too big. It's like, imagine being in the Soviet Union as a dedicated communist in 1980 and you know what the future's going to be. What would you do? You couldn't change it. And it's I feel the same here. And like all of the predictions that were being made by the peak oil people, like not the fast crashers, which is always frustrating. The fast crash people were wrong. But the process, this long, slow, grinding decline that John Michael Greer sketched out, and I disagree with him on a lot. But
The
when
sucky collapse, as I
yeah,
think Kathy McMahon put it.
yeah, it's not cinematic at all. But if you had imagine like you could gone back in time to say 2007, and somebody said, "Tell me about the future." Oh, Donald Trump's president, and oh, there's all this mad stuff going on.
No, tell me about the real future, not the Simpsons future.
Yeah. Like all
I
these
have
things.
to take a quick bio break. I will be right
Yep.
back.
Sure. Nate Hagen's still on it too. Yeah. His YouTube channel is up. I've subscribed. I haven't just settled down to watch anything yet. I really have to be in the mood for that. I always liked him. He seemed to be fairly decent. Some of the people in the scene kind of went off the fucking far end though. Like I won't name any names, but like very strange stuff. And where they're kind of a weird mix of good and bad, and it's just so exhausting trying to figure them out. Yeah, it's weird. But it's what, 2023 now. So it's yeah, I think the unconventional natural gas stuff kind of gave people like a false sense of security. Surprising thing for me was like Russia coming back, because I know they had peaked prior to the collapse, but I think they kind of masked their actual geology a little bit. Ever listened to the Crazy Town podcast from the Post Carbon Institute? No, I'll look into that. You might hear my cat in the background. I think this mic will pick up everything. I'm glad the PCI seem to be still active. That was the people I kind of worked a lot with Richard Heinberg on my movie too. So Richard seems to be sane. I've seen him in person a couple of times. Quick backstory on peak oil. Basically, The idea is that there's a finite amount of oil. When you aggregate the discovery of oil, you get sort of a bell curve, and the extraction of oil, when aggregated over like large areas, you get a bell curve as well. And you extract the easy stuff first, and then the back end is still a huge amount, but it gets more and more expensive to get it out. So on the way up, energy is cheap. On the way down, it gets more and more expensive. And you get this awful wedge where when the price goes too high, the economy craters. When the price goes too low, the energy companies go bankrupt. And that used to be a fairly flexible band, but it's getting narrower and narrower and harder to maintain. So it's one theory as to why we're seeing economic chaos, that either we're getting squeezed or the energy companies are getting squeezed, or one or the other. So we had that bizarre thing that happened, remember, a few years ago when the price of oil went negative, which none of us expected that back in the glory days of peak oil. If you'd said, yeah, I'm from the future, the day will come when 12 years from now, when the price of oil would be negative $25 a barrel, nobody would have believed that. But that's roughly it. And then there's a thing called URR, ultimately recoverable reserves. And they can, usually it's around 40 to 50% of a reserve. And they can add a few percent to that by using these very elaborate techniques or advanced techniques. So when somebody says we found 1 billion barrels of oil, you've really found potentially 400 to 500 million that you can extract. But again, the bottom end of that is going to start getting to be much harder to get out, or the flow rate will be slower, all the technical bullshit. And so we're kind of in that back end now. There's still a lot of the stuff there. They actually, to be fair, have done a quite impressive job of getting the garbage out. But if you look at a map of a fracking area, it's just like this honeycomb of dots. And the fracking oil, they build a well, and like with a classic liquid well, they'll get like a elegant, roughly a bell curve if you have a few of them. With the fracking well, you get a big spike, and then it just drops like a tadpole's tail. So you have to build a second well. It's $1 million per. So that's not cheap oil. So the only way they're getting that is by subsidizing it or borrowing money at 0% interest. So we're in this process now where the interest rates can't be held at zero anymore. They're going up. A lot of these debts are bad. So we'll find out how many of these wells are actually economically viable or not. Art Berman will be a good person to Google. He's been writing about this forever. And he's another one of these people who never let up. Like, he's like, yeah, this is screwed. And just the rule of thumb is everything takes longer than you think, even when you factor in the fact that that everything takes longer than you think. We're talking about stuff that the story began. I was born in 1969. American oil production peaked about the year after, one or two. And that's been going on. There are no major discoveries of oil comparable to Gawar in Saudi Arabia. There's like 5 mega giants: Gawar, Dajing, Cantarell in Mexico, Dajing in China, Burgan in Kuwait, and I know maybe one other, forgetting now. And then you get big fields like the North Sea, which is drying up, and Alaska, which they kicked in the 1980s, but their British North Sea is gone. They began importing in 1999, I think, or they peaked in 1999. They became a net importer in the 2010, 2015 era, I think. So pretty poor Scotland, if they had been allowed to go independent when they wanted to in 1979, they would have been an incredibly rich country. And instead, they're a bankrupt backwater of the UK. And what oil is left will go to the UK and not them. So that's a shame. They would have been more like Norway. Yeah. So yeah, when you hear about discoveries, like 1 billion is nothing. You need to be seeing like a 500 billion field or $1 trillion field. And there was a peak oil conference where somebody pointed out that even if they found a $1 trillion deep water field off the coast of Brazil, it
$1
would push
trillion or a trillion barrel?
trillion barrels. Sorry, it would push the peaking of oil just consumption out by, I think, 7 years. So people were like, oh, like it was that little. Like that's how big the economy is and how big the demand is. Not that you wouldn't want it; they'd fight a war for it, but
Yeah.
it's nothing. And you see these news stories. We found a huge field in the North Sea. It's a billion barrels. 12 days of global oil production or consumption. 12 days, if that.
So Dermot's giving a very admirable presentation of the respectable technical academic side of peak oil, but the other part of it, was there's a lot of people who are very dissatisfied with their lives in, contemporary capitalist industrial society,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
they are pining for the end.
Yeah.
And so I've been to several peak oil conferences, and it is a mix of people with this, very technically oriented perspective and people who want the system to collapse for one reason or another.
Mhm.
And it was a very interesting big tent mixture of, cultural and political perspectives. You had some very
Yeah.
hard right-wing people who were really looking forward to that survivalist lifestyle. And yeah, exactly. And then you had the hippie back to the landers who are also looking
Mhm.
forward, to what they thought would be the lifestyle, which would be, the small scale farm holder, working dawn till dusk, milking the cows, weeding the garden and all. And this was before the current cultural polarization. So a lot of those people can't stand together in the same room anymore without ripping each other's throats out. Because,
Yeah.
as Dermot was saying, a lot of the people who were into it were these, PM or the professional managerial class people who had expectations of, upper middle class salaries and respectable lifestyles and whatnot. And those people have all gone, to the blue side in the current cultural
Mhm.
debate.
Yeah.
And they would openly call a lot of the people on the other side, vile names, and some of the people on the other side deserve to be called vile names. But the,
Yeah.
the moment in which I was in peak oil, the current culture would not allow that same congregation of people to be in one room.
Yeah.
So, like, if you look at where the big names have gone, like I've heard you mention Richard Heinberg, and he's still
Yeah.
definitely on the, the technical
Yeah.
end of things. And I think Ben Rubber mentioned Nate Hagens, who's also, in that very academic, very scientific perspective. But then
Mhm.
the people who are in it for cultural reasons, like James Howard Kunstler. Do you read his blog
Yeah.
anymore? And he's definitely on the straight and narrow compared to Dmitry Orlov, who has just moved back to Russia and is a full-on Putin
Mhm.
apologist. And
Yeah.
and who is there, the things have happened to him that I don't like he had to take down his Patreon because the bank that his Patreon funds were being deposited into, that account was frozen because it was attached to a Russian. um,
Right.
I I've been working with some folks in a podcasting venture who are not political people, but they are all Russian. And
Mhm.
so much of just being Russian made running a podcast based business very difficult
Yeah.
because they had to have everything based outside of Russia, and they had to hide their Russian origins at every turn, because they would be punished for Putin's malfeasance. And
Yeah.
these people have all fled Russia, to avoid being inducted into Putin's war. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's
Yeah, no, we know a guy here who Irish guy, his wife is Russian. They were engaged and he wasn't allowed to marry her here. So he couldn't get her into the country, and he's had to do this very dangerous 3-state hop to get to her so they can be married. But yeah, it's been blocked from getting into the country just because of her nationality. It's fucking ridiculous. I don't like Dmitry Orlov, and I actually stupidly sent him money when his engine broke, and then he went off the fucking deep right, um, crazy town. And I thought, God, can I get my $100 back, you prick? But they shouldn't take his bank account away just because of his surname. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't get it. Like you're not winning this economic sanctions war either. Like yeah, Russia's doing fine. Um, yeah, we're the
and
ones that
and
are
by
screwed.
contemporary standards, Russia has a shit ton of oil and a shit ton of
Mhm.
national gas, and
Yeah,
there's no amount of economic sanctions that's going to change that, and
no.
there's no amount of economic sanctions that's going to prevent people from buying that hydrocarbon energy.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think the latest goal is to, like, Russia's basically pivoted their economic trade barrier routes down to out away from Europe toward China and India and Pakistan, Iran. It has accelerated the decline of Western economies, and rather than managing our decline to slow it down so that we have a chance of hitting the ground at a less steep angle, it's like let's just do that and see what happens. The same people who gave us 2008 and all the other disasters at it again. Like they were never sent to jail. That was our mistake. We should have, the same cretins were left in charge, and this is what they produce. And there were ways to avoid this war, and they didn't take them. and I won't go into specifics, but plenty of blame to go around. But yeah, the caliber of leaders in the West is just staggering to me. That we now have German Greens who lecture us about carbon dioxide, but are absolutely fine with depleted uranium. Like, what the fuck? Like, Petra Kelly will be turning in her grave. Like, what is wrong with you people? Where Trump is to the left of the German Green Party now on the war. Like, you're being outflanked on the left by Donald Trump. Time to go on a vision quest at this point. I don't know what to make of it. Had they been
Drink a
completely
55-gallon
infiltrated?
barrel of ayahuasca over the course of a month. Yeah. Hey, Dermot, we have been on, I mean, from the perspective of people who've tuned into this live stream, we've been on for less than an hour, but we're going on hour 3 now because we've recorded podcast material. So we should wrap it up. But I just want to say that Dermot is a podcaster himself. He's got a podcast that he does with his wife called, what is it, Blooms and Barnacles?
Yeah. I think it's
Yep.
James
And
Joyce's Ulysses. Yeah.
say a bit about that.
Yeah, no, Kelly that's how we met. She was doing a Ulysses book club in Portland, Oregon, in an Irish pub there on Northeast Portland. And I did the artwork on the side of the building. So that's how we met. 1 year later, we're married. And a year later, we moved back to Ireland. So that's where I am now, in the very old cottage with Linux, Tux the Penguin, and trying to get my Linux machine up and running soon. And so we do the podcast. It's been, small audience is a very niche podcast. It's the kind of thing that, we're never going to get a big audience. So we try to find people that are really into James Joyce or Irish literature. And Kelly does like the laser focus on the text. And sometimes if we need to talk about more Irish cultural stuff or Irish identity or what it's like to be Irish, then I come in then and help with that. I've never read the book, so she'll give me a passage, I read it, ask me what I think, and then it's Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and you guess which one I am. And so we try to be lighthearted about it. We are actually doing a live event. Hopefully, it's 99.9% locked in the James Joyce Centre in Dublin the day before Bloomsday this year, and that'll be on their website if anybody is in Dublin and wants to see us there live. But it'll be about the occult influences on Ulysses. So there's a lot of Joyce's stuff deals with A.E. Russell and the Golden Dawn and Blavatsky. He knew all about that stuff, and he kind of made fun of a lot of it. So he called Madame Blavatsky Madame Blavatsky. So that was the depth of his subtlety when it came to. Man was filthy too. Like, he was a filthy fucker. And the great tragedy for people who love horror, James Joyce would have been the greatest horror writer of all time. Absolutely. Some of the stuff in Ulysses is horrific. Like, the body horror stuff, you wouldn't want to see in the movie. Like, it's absolutely heinous. Like, this is disturbing as hell. So yeah, he was something else. And then my other website is angryanimator.com. That's all my animation work and new stuff. So we're hoping to do more content on that too. But whenever I can get the lead paint scraped off the room here and get my computer set up. Fucking lead.
All right. Well, hey, Dermot, thanks so much. It's always fun to talk to you.
Same here, Camo.